Hi, my name is Melody Arabu, and I'm a third grade teacher in the Walled Lake School District in Michigan. What I'm sharing with you today is a system that I developed to help kids master math facts. This is a differentiated system that comes with all of the materials that you would need to implement, and it takes only about 20 minutes of class time per week. So let's get started. I'd like to start by saying that according to the Common Core standards, there are 3 phases to develop fluency with memorization. And phase 1 is constructing operational meaning. So this will come with any work that you do during your math instruction and gives kids a good number sense and then just a really good understanding of what those numbers mean and how these facts work. Phase 2 is developing reasoning strategies where they can think about strategies that they know that can help them to solve unknown strategies. And this system goes along with phase 3, developing quick recall. So of course, you'll be working on phase 1 and phase 2 with your students on a regular basis, and this system helps students to master those facts during phase 3, where you just want them to have that automaticity of recalling a fact within 3 seconds. So when I think about facts for kids, I think about pi for adults. So pi is a very big, overwhelming number, and if you wanted to memorize all of them, that would be a huge task. So that's how I kind of thought about it with my third graders when I would tell them to master their facts or to be practicing their facts. I realized one day that there was just too many of them, and they would need a better system in place to help narrow their focus. So I like this little cartoon that just shows just how challenging that would be to try to memorize those. Now, if you were tasked to memorize pi, I always like to ask teachers, what would you do if you needed to do that? So maybe the first 100,000 digits of pi, or even the first 1,000. How would you tackle that, and what strategies would you use? So just to give you a good visual, this is what pi looks like. So if you had to do this, answers I get from teachers a lot are breaking it down into smaller parts and looking for patterns. And those are really the 2 things that I had in mind when I developed this system for facts. So we're thinking about narrowing the focus for the kids and helping them to memorize and recall those facts in a smaller way in chunks. So I started using this with my kids, and I thought that it was effective, but I was part of a teacher leadership association called Galileo, where we were asked to do an action research project. So I chose this as mine because I thought it would be important to have data to go along with, the results that I was seeing in my classroom. This is the process that we used for action research, and we spent about 5 to 6 weeks on this, and I asked questions, did the research, collected feedback, and gathered that data as I went to see if this was indeed effective for students. So how does this work? A special fact test is given to students once a week, and for me, Fridays work well. Friday, our schedule and our routine is a little bit different than usual, so it's easy to throw in a 20-minute fact test. I also think it's a good way to wrap up the week, and then it gives me some time before Monday to get those results to the kids for the following week. This system narrows the focus for students, so memorizing facts is not overwhelming, just like pi. It takes only 20 minutes of class time once a week. Other than that, daily practice is built into our math workshop, so they do about 5 minutes a day independently, and then at home they have a fact log to use, which I'll share in a little while. This test can also be given 3 different ways to meet the testing style of all students. So the main way is timed, but there are other options for kids who struggle with timing or for kids that might have an IEP or special needs and just need to look at this work in a different way. So how does it work? The facts are divided into sets. So this is an addition one. You can see we have +2s, +3s, and +4s. And that's our way of narrowing the focus for the kids. So instead of having to do all of the facts at once, they would just be focusing on one set at a time. You'll notice that the multiplication fact test looks just like the addition, and that's set up deliberately so that the teacher can give this test without having to do it 4 different ways. Students get 30 seconds to complete a set, which is about 3 seconds per problem, and that's our goal, is for them to be able to complete that within that time for that automaticity. If they complete the set within that 30 seconds, then they'll circle yes in red pen. That's just to show that they were able to get that done in that time frame. We move through this together, so after set 1 we would go on to set 2, and I'd give them 30 seconds again. If they completed that set by the end of 30 seconds, then they would again circle yes in red pen. Now, it's important to know that the teacher is going to be the one who will check for accuracy when this is turned in. So I get the question a lot, well, how do you go through and check each set with the class? There is no need to do that. That's something that you'll do once they turn it in, and it'll be very easy to see if there are kids who are just kind of filling in answers, which happens very rarely, and if it does, it's addressed early on, and then it's not really a problem anymore. So for example, in set 2, you can see that this student had 1 error. I would still consider that mastery of set 2, so I wouldn't worry about that too much, but that's something I would have noticed and noted and circled when I was going through that test myself. So then we move on to set 3, and after the 30 seconds, in this case, the student did not finish because they're not quite so comfortable with their 3s yet, which is the whole idea, is to figure out where their area of instruction and need is. And in this case, it would be set 3. So students use red pen to circle any problems that they did not complete after the 30 seconds. So their paper might look like this, and then they circle no if they missed more than 1. In this case, the student missed 5. So that's a clear understanding that set 3 is something that they struggle with, and that will be their focus for the week. So they circled no there. Now, students continue through all sets even after they've circled no. So even though they would probably know that this is going to be their set for the week, and of course that's determined by the teacher after it's turned in, they would still give 4s a try and then 5s a try and so on, because it doesn't hurt for them to practice those facts that they do know and even try to get some that they don't. It is the teacher's job to determine the next week's set or score based on the first no column. So sometimes a student might think that they're on a certain set, but after the teacher looks it over, they may have noticed some errors somewhere, and that's why it's up to the teacher to determine that overall. So when I tried this with my action research project, I did it for 5 weeks, and we started off in January, so I jumped right to multiplication with my 3rd graders. When I did a baseline test, you could see that that's the green dot there. The majority of the class could not get past 3s because that seems to be the area that it doesn't come so easy for kids. So the baseline score for most of the kids was times 3s. The beauty of this, though, is that after using this system for 5 weeks, narrowing that focus and giving students only 1 set at a time to focus on, and the ability to move at their own pace, shows that by the end of 5 weeks, most kids had not only passed multiplication, but had also passed division. So I did have a few kids who stayed pretty close to where they were, and that was my next task after the action research, was to figure out ways to move them along, and I'll share some of those strategies with you as well. But overall, this is a very effective, very powerful way to help students master those facts, and it's something that I've used in my own classroom for the last 5 years, and now it's being used in classrooms all over the state of Michigan very successfully with great feedback. So fact tests are formatted the same way for all operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So a teacher can administer the test the same way no matter what operations students are on. So think of it as a class. You have some students on multiplication, some students on subtraction, some on division. You can still have that 20 minutes where it works well. You say set 1, 30 seconds, go. At the end, they circle yes or no. Then we move on to set 2, set 3, and so on. So it's still easy to administer that with all 4 operations happening. There are 4 different versions for each operation, so students cannot memorize set order or copy off their neighbor's paper. So within multiplication, there are 4 different versions still set up the same way. Same for division and the other operations. So I usually just throw those in the copy machine and they come out, all in a different order. And then when I hand them out, the students don't know which version they're going to get, and would not be able to memorize that or even worry about what their neighbor is doing. Students have to show mastery of sets every week instead of just showing proficiency once and moving on. So this is a key component to this system because it's easy for kids to memorize those threes and show that they know them, and then a few weeks later they've lost those again. So with this set, every single week they'll have to show that mastery as they move through the sets. So that takes away that risk of losing what they know. So here's one student's journey. You can see here that the first week they were struggling with the threes a bit, so that was their focus for 1 week, and that was their score. The following week, not only did they master the threes, but they did show that they still knew their ones and twos, which is so important, and then they moved on to fours. And then after spending a week on fours, you can see the third week, they still show mastery of ones, twos, and threes. They have now beaten their fours, and then they can focus on fives. So it's a great way to build upon what they know each week and to show that mastery over and over again. These are the directions I use with students. I just ask them to take out a pencil and a red checking pen. When they get their paper, and I have a very easy way to organize those, which will show up a little bit later in this presentation, I ask them to write their name, their class number, the date, and last week's score. Now they should know their score from last week because that is what they were practicing for an entire week. So that's something that they should be able to do on their own. And if you do have a student that doesn't know their score, that's an indication that they have not done their job in practicing. Then I tell them that when I say go, they have 30 seconds to complete a set. After 30 seconds, I always say pencils down, red pens up. They like that consistency. I ask them that they have no pencils in their hands until we're ready for the next set, just to make sure they're not trying to sneak any extra answers in. I do require that they circle any blank answers from that set in red pen right away, again, so they can't go back and fill in answers at a later time. If they completed the entire set, they circle yes with their red pen. If they circled more than one, I circle no with a red pen, or I ask them to. I do ask that all students try all sets, and then I just remind them that I will determine this week's score for them, so they don't have to worry about putting a new score on their paper. So now that you know how it works, we can talk about determining score for a moment. Now, you do not have to check every set every week because that would become very overwhelming with 30 students in a class. So basically, all you have to do is take a look at the first place that they circled no. So this is clear that the student would need some time to work on fours, and that could be their score. I do like to go back one set and just double check to make sure that they're still solid with those facts. In this case, the student got one wrong. I still consider one wrong or one missed as mastery. And of course, remember, the following week, they'll still have to show that they know those threes. So this would be easy to determine that their score is times fours for the week. Now you'll notice that they have fives already, but we're not trying to jump ahead. We're just taking it one set at a time. For record keeping, I just have one page in my gradebook where I can just put the date at the top, and then I would indicate the operation first and then the set that they're on. So it's important to remember you do not need to check every set every week. Just start with where they circled no and then check the set right before it for understanding and accuracy. The way I document it in my gradebook is just this is one student that I'm following along through the year, and it's really wonderful to be able to see their progress each week. So this student was on +2s, the following week 3s, 4s, 5s. 5s took them a couple weeks, but then they moved on to 6s. Took them a couple weeks for 7s, and then something clicked and they passed addition altogether. You might notice, let's see, where's another good example? I have some students who are just really strong in math, and the first week they passed all of addition, then passed all of subtraction the second week, passed multiplication the third week, and passed division the fourth week. Now this is clearly a student who already has a great number sense and already who has that automaticity. So there is a way for them to continue on without having to be bored or do the same things that the rest of the kids are doing. And I'll show you that a little later as well. This is a math fact graph that I made that students use in their data notebooks. And this is a way for them to keep track of their progress, to set goals for themselves, to notice if they've gotten stuck. But they just have this in their binder and they take it out each week after they get their score and they color in their progress. And this is two-sided, so it's something that can last throughout the whole year. So here's a little scoring sample. If this were a student that I was looking at, I noticed that they missed one. The rest of these are correct, so I'd still count that as a pass. They missed one here. The rest are correct, so that's pass. And so really the first place where they show an area of need is set 6, and so that would be their score for the week. If they've completed all sets and it appears that they've passed, I just do a spot check for accuracy. So again, I don't want to check every single problem, but I might just check one here, one here, one here, and one here. And that just shows that they are thinking about accuracy as they go, and then this student would pass. So in this example, in the first example I should say, this one was well done and my spot check proved to be correct and the student did pass. In this one, however, at first glance it looked like they passed, but as I took a closer look and did a spot check, I started to notice that there were lots of errors in the second half of the test. So while this student may have thought that they passed, I would take a look to see maybe where they were last week. This one could be -6s. I had -8s here, so this student must have been practicing those in prior weeks. Sometimes I can give them more than one set. I try not to give more than 2 though, so that it doesn't become overwhelming. I also give them a little reminder and feedback that accuracy is more important than speed, and the speed will come with accuracy in time as they continue to practice. So here's a sample one that should be nice and clear cut. These are all yeses. You could do a spot check if you want to, but I'm going to go to the first place that they circled no. I'm going to check the set right before it. Looks pretty solid even though they have one error. And this one is clearly a score of +7s for the week. Now this one is a little trickier only in the sense that the first place they circled no is set 7. But as I did a check before, I noticed they had a couple errors, so that made me kind of look around. And this is where teacher discretion would come in. Since they have more than one wrong on 4s, you know your student best. You might know that that was just an off week for them. You might know that they've showed their 4s every week before then. So we have a couple possibilities. This week's score could be -4s. Or it could be -7s, and that's up to you and what you know about that student. All right, so this one is another one that's clear cut. This week's score would be ×3s. Here's the first area that you can see that they need to work on. Most scores are clear cut, and those tricky ones only happen once in a while. Here's a great example of a student who jumped from ×4s to ×7s in 1 week. So that's exciting. Last week their score was 4s. They must have really put some time and energy into it. 5s are usually pretty easy for kids. And this student must have thought about those 6s, and then now they jumped up to 7s in just 1 short week. Once in a while, a student might fall backwards. 3s and 4s seem to be the area that happens with most often. I'm not sure why, but after many years of doing this, I know that's a pattern that I see. Oops, I'm going to go back. So they were on 4s this last week, but clearly they have lost some of their 3s. So this is a chance where I might give a student 2 sets to focus on. 3 is really just going to be a refresher so they don't lose those, and then 4s, they're still trying to pass those. All right, so now you know how the test works, and you know how to determine a student's score. So now what? Now they have their set, they have their score and their focus for the week. You need to give them some practice strategies. So here are a few ways that students can practice those 10 in a week and then hopefully prepare them for that following Friday. Fact logs, Math Magician website, practice sheets for each of the 4 operations in each set, flashcards, and YouTube videos with tips and tricks, and I'll show you each of those. Here's what a fact log looks like. It's a lot like a reading log, except that it's a chance for kids to show that they're practicing facts at home. So they have to practice their own set of facts for at least 10 minutes each day and keep track of it below. And I ask parents to sign it on Thursday nights and return it to school on Friday. So on Monday, what set did they practice? This should stay the same all week unless they feel confident and want to move and try a couple different ones. Practiced with just could be, is that mom or dad? Is that a sibling? Is it the computer? Is it flashcards? Is it paper and pencil? I just like to gauge an idea of how the students practice and if they're trying different ways. How many minutes? Of course, at least 10. And then this part is important, the hard facts. So let's say they are on times 7s. We've already narrowed their focus to just 10 problems that they have to master in a week. And even within those 10, there are going to be some easy ones like 7 times 1, 7 times 10, 7 times 5, 7 times 2. So while they're practicing, I want them to really think about which facts are they still stuck on. 7 times 6, 7 times 8. And they can keep track of those here. If they're not able to get them within 3 seconds, those are considered hard facts. And then they can just focus on those. So we've now taken their focus from 10 to maybe 3. And that's how kids will master the facts by the end of the week. So here are a couple of examples. This student was on +7, so they stayed with that all week. They practiced a couple different ways. I love how specific they get with minutes. And then in the beginning of the week, 7 + 6 and 7 + 8 seemed to be the hard ones for them. The following day, 7 + 6 was the only hard one. And then by the last 2 days, none of them were hard, which is, of course, the growth that we want to see. This child was on +4s. Again, practiced a few different ways, different amounts of time. These were the hard facts for them. And then as they got to the week, none of them were hard. And then this student should easily be able to pass 4s on Friday. Here's a student who started off on 4s, had a couple hard facts. The next day felt good enough to try 5s and 6s, and then stuck with the 6s. So this is a student who's really ambitious and maybe trying to beat more than one set in 1 week. You might have a couple kids who do that, but the majority of the class sticks with their own set for that week. Now, when I first start doing this in class, it's unclear to parents what this is about. So I do have kind of an explanation sheet for parents that I send home, and it's very detailed and descriptive of what the expectation is for each part of the log. And then once they've done it once, the kids and the parents both feel super comfortable with doing this at home. So this is also something that I include when I share the resources for this system. Math Magician is another great strategy for practicing because this is a website that sets it up the same way that I do, in sets. So students would just pick their operation, pick their set, and then there are a couple different ways to practice, but it gives them repetition. So it might have the same problem 3 different times popping up, and it gives them a little bit more time. Now, if they do pass their set, they can get a certificate that shows that they did that, and they can print it off, and it's something cute and something that gets them excited about doing this and succeeding with it. We do this in the computer lab every week, and so I just put up some rules the first few times that we're doing it to make sure that the kids know how it works and what the expectations are for my classroom. I let them only print a certificate if they get 100% on their own set, because of course kids will do like 1s or 2s just to be able to get that 100%. So that's very important. I only let them print 1 certificate, even if they keep passing over and over again. If they pass their set, I let them know that they can try the next set if they're comfortable, or they can keep practicing theirs. But still, again, only 1 certificate. If they've passed addition, there is mixed addition, so they can really give that, get that challenge and see if they know them mixed up. Same thing with subtraction. If you have kids who are what I call fact masters, who have already passed all 4 operations, they can try the advanced challenge of Math Magic, which mixes all the facts and all the operations. So those kids really, really like to test their knowledge on that. Here are a couple iPad apps that do something similar. On Math Fact Master on the left, students can practice where it's timed as a challenge, or they can just practice with flashcards where it shows them the problem and then they can click on it for the answer. And they do that set by set. Fast Facts Math is similar. One of these is 99 cents and one of them is free, but I always get mixed up on which. But they're both great apps to use for this type of work. All right, so we have practice sheets as well. So these are something I created just because I wanted them to have that repetition of those same facts for their set. And I actually copy these double-sided, so it would be the same on the front and back, because they're going to do one side in class as part of their daily work independently, and then they can take it home and practice the other side at home. Notice that there's no spot for a name on these because I don't collect them. This is something that's just repeated exposure for the kids. So here's how I organize everything. You can see I have this crate in a easily accessible area in my classroom, and then I have it color-coded. So the red is addition. These are each of the practice sheets by set, and then in the back I have the addition fact tests. Kids cannot take the fact test themselves. Those are reserved only for Fridays when the teacher distributes them. But the practice sheets they can grab anytime, specifically during our math workshop where it is one of their jobs as I'm working with groups. Blue is subtraction, so there's all the practice sheets by set, and then the fact tests in the back, then multiplication and division. So this makes it so easy for me. There's zero prep time. Basically, during the week, the kids are self-sufficient about gathering their practice sheets, and then on Fridays, I have the copies ready to go, and I can just call the kids up. If they're taking addition, they can come and grab addition, subtraction, fact test, multiplication, and division. So zero to very little prep, and then very easy to distribute and get that going on Fridays. Flashcards are great because I just take index cards and cut them, or construction paper, and either they can make them or I can. Where if they're on times 6s, I'll just make them a set of flashcards. And then what I like about this is that they're just a physical tool that the kids can use, and they can even sort them. So when when someone holds it up for them, if they know it within 3 seconds, it goes in the easy pile. If they don't, it goes in the hard pile, and then they can just focus on those hard ones. So this helps narrow the focus more for the student, just as the fact log does. So these are just some videos that I found on YouTube that have tips for memorizing sets. I mean, you might know some of the tricks, like the 9s trick on the hands, which is the Math is Handy video on the right. There's one with a tic-tac-toe board that I had never seen before, but it's very interesting. There's something with 7s for football, the score in football, 7, 14, 21. So you can just Google on YouTube, or just Google or search in YouTube for those videos that the kids can watch. They're usually pretty short. Some other tips for memorizing certain problems are make up a rhyme. So growing up, for some reason, I always remember 6 times 8 went on a date, they came back as 48. It's very silly and doesn't really mean anything, but it did help me remember 6 times 8 is 48. Also, kids can use the fact that they know. So if they know 6 times 5, which is an easy fact, then that can help them figure out 6 times 6. So thinking about that, reasoning strategies on how you can use the ones that you know to find the ones that you don't. And then just knowing the tricks, like the 9s trick. One of my favorite tricks is 4s, which I call double-double. So anything times 4 is just the number doubled and then doubled again. So for example, 8 times 4, 8 doubled is 16, 16 doubled is 32. So double-double. Now, what's great is when students pass. So we need to know what they should do if they pass. So here's what a test might look like. All yeses, did a spot check, looks great. So I just write pass addition, and then I do a congratulations. When I give these back to the students, I'd make a big deal of this. The class would cheer and celebrate for this student. And then I just write a note so that they'll know that they move on to subtraction for the following week. And I just have them start with 2s unless they're comfortable to move on to 3s. This student can get something that I call a second chance fact test. And I started doing this for kids when I noticed that they were really close, or that something just didn't seem right with one of their sets. So a second chance fact test is just a chance for them to do these problems orally with you. So you can see on this one, there wasn't one particular set that the student was struggling on. There were just a few holes missing on certain sets. So I called the student up during a snack break, asked them orally, what is 7 times 9? What is 7 times 7? And it becomes very clear very quickly if the student knows that or not. So here's one. I write on their second chance fact test so their parents or even the student will understand why they're passing, even if they had problems circled. So as I asked them this, originally they thought 3 times 7 was 18, which is not correct, of course, but when I did it with them orally, they got it, so I put a check mark next to it. So I went through and did that with any that they missed, and I felt very confident that this child was ready to move on. So they passed multiplication. I write them a note to move on to division 2s, and I just wrote a little note that they got a second chance fact test. So when students give those answers orally, you'll tell very, very quickly if they have those facts mastered or if they're still struggling to get those beyond the 3 seconds. Once a student has passed all 4 operations, they become fact masters. So this is another thing that we celebrate in our classroom because this is our ultimate goal for students before they leave 3rd grade. Fact masters have tested out of the regular fact tests. So instead, they move on to an overall score, completing the entire test as fast as possible without stopping between sets. So on Friday, when I'm giving the fact test the traditional way to the majority of the kids, I might have a small group of fact masters that are just working at their own pace. I would have a timer set up for them, and as soon as they finish the entire page, they would look to see what their time is, and then that becomes their score for the week, and then their job the next week is to try to beat that score. So these are kids who already know this, but of course you don't want them to not do anything because then they would lose it. And also they like a challenge, so they like to be able to try to get better and better each week. One thing that they get excited about is that fact masters no longer need to do fact logs. There's no reason for them to be practicing for 10 minutes at night at home when they've already showed that they're capable of this. So here's what a fact master's test might look like. This is the first time a student tried it the week before they had passed division and become a fact master. So this week, when I said go, they got started and notice that there's no yeses or no circled because they did not have to stop in between sets. They just went through it. And after they finished, they looked at the timer to see that it took them 4 minutes and 42 seconds, which is now their score. And I do input that into my grade book, and I keep track of their progress each week with their time. This student had done this in 3 minutes and 15 seconds the week prior, and in 1 week jumped down to 2 minutes and 39 seconds. So they're just getting stronger and stronger with those facts. So differentiating students' needs, we can do second chance fact tests for when there are just a few holes missing. We also, though, can have students that just don't make progress. So they might be stuck on 3s and multiplication for 5 or 6 weeks, and something is just not working, so we need to differentiate for them. And then there are also those students that struggle with being timed. So the timing piece gives them anxiety, or maybe their mind just processes things a little bit slower, and the time frustrates them. So I wanted to make sure that those students could be successful with the system as well. So for kids that don't like to be timed, there is a way to do this untimed. So you can maybe even have them in a different spot. When you say go, they can get started, and instead of just trying to rush through, they can work at their own pace as they move through the sets. Now, I actually just let them do this as I'm giving the test to the rest of the class. It usually ends up being about 10 minutes by the time we finish, and that's a good amount of time to see how far these kids can get. Or you could just tell them you're going to have 10 minutes to see how far you can get on this fact test. So what that looks like at the end of 10 minutes is something like this. This student moved at their own pace through 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and then at the end of the 10 minutes, they were on the 5s. So this child's set for the week would be 5s because that still narrows their focus and gives them just 10 to focus on. And then the goal is for the following week for them to get past those 5s and get to the 6s within those 10 minutes. So there is a little bit of a timing piece in here, but it's without that stress and pressure of 30 seconds at a time. So this has worked really, really well for kids who maybe just need to think about these differently, maybe who haven't moved through the sets quite as quickly. So they're still getting that repeated exposure, and they're still getting a score and a set each week. So at the end of the year, the results have been phenomenal each year. But when I really, really tracked this closely, out of 27 students, I had 22 who passed all operations and were fact masters. So I felt super confident sending them off to 4th grade, ready for that long division and all that complicated math work that comes along. That makes it really hard if they don't know their facts. I only had 2 students that were on division. And those kids had already mastered multiplication, which is really important. And then I had 3 students who were still on multiplication, and those were kids that I would give some extra practice work to over the summer to try to get them up to speed. But great results for a class of 27. Managing different groups and timing them simultaneously may seem a little bit challenging, but it's actually quite easy. So you might have 3 different ways of giving this test. You've got the kids who are doing it timed, 30 seconds per set. That's done with the teacher, and they can move through those sets without going ahead of the teacher. And that'll be the majority of the kids. Then you might have a small group working in a spot in your room that are doing it untimed. So again, those kids get 10 minutes just to see how far they can get and see where they fall for their score. And then you might have another group of those fact masters who have already beat the sets and are just doing an overall score. So they would just have their own timer going, and once they finish, they just write in that time. So 3 different groups, all within those 20 minutes, each just doing it slightly different, all with same great results of narrowing that focus for them. Here are the fact test directions again, and these directions work well for all 3 of the groups, maybe with just a little modification for the untimed and for the overall score kids. So in this system, there's a package of all the materials that have been shared with you. So that would come with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division fact tests. That's 4 of each. So you can copy those and keep them in your crate. I also include the fact test directions, the fact logs, the fact log directions for parents to use in the beginning of the year, the rules for Math Magician, practice sheets for all operations, sets 1 through 10, the math fact graph for the data notebook, and then this PowerPoint for reference. So that includes all of the things that you would need to implement this system and to get those kids to master their math facts. So if you do choose to try this system, I'm always open to your feedback, so please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, any suggestions, and of course any progress that you see with the students. I always love to hear success stories from teachers who have seen great growth with their students with these. You can check out my website. Please email me at the Gmail account here, and then also follow me on Twitter. And I hope to hear from you. Thanks, and have a great day.